Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a worn cloth, squinting at the alien starship's engine through the dim light of his repair bay. The Valdorian cruiser had been brought in 3 days ago, its captain claiming the hyperdrive was making strange noises. Marcus had heard stranger things in his 15 years as a mechanic on Station Omega-7, but something about this particular ship felt different. The captain, a tall humanoid with silver skin and 4 arms, had been unusually quiet during the initial consultation. Most alien customers either complained loudly about human incompetence or tried to haggle down his already reasonable prices. This one just stood there, watching Marcus work with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "You are the one they call Chen," the captain had said in heavily accented standard. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, not looking up from his diagnostic scanner. "That's me. Best human mechanic in this sector, or so they tell me." The captain's 4 eyes had gleamed with something Marcus couldn't identify. "Yes. The stories of your skill have reached even the Outer Rim territories. Tell me, human, do you believe in fate?" That conversation had been 2 days ago, and Marcus hadn't seen the captain since. The Valdorian had simply left his ship in the bay with instructions to fix whatever needs fixing and disappeared into the station's labyrinthine corridors. Marcus had shrugged it off as typical alien eccentricity and focused on his work. Now, as he made the final adjustments to the hyperdrive's resonance chamber, Marcus felt a presence behind him. He turned to find the captain standing in the doorway, but something was wrong. The alien silver skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and he moved with the careful, measured steps of someone fighting pain. "The work is complete?" the captain asked, his voice noticeably weaker than before. Marcus nodded, setting down his tools. "Good as new. Actually better than new. I upgraded your stabilization matrix while I was in there. No charge for that." A strange smile crossed the captain's alien features. "You show kindness to strangers. This is uncommon in these times." "Business is business," Marcus replied with a shrug. "But good work speaks for itself. Repeat customers are worth more than quick credits." The captain stepped closer, and Marcus could see that the alien was trembling slightly. "I am called Vexhai of the 7th Fleet. I was king of the Valdorian outer colonies." Marcus blinked in surprise. "A king in his repair bay? Your Majesty, I had no idea." "If I'd known, you would have done the same work," Vexhai interrupted, that strange smile returning. "This is why the stories spoke true. You judge beings by their actions, not their titles or species." The king reached into a pouch at his side and withdrew a small, crystalline device. Marcus recognized it as a standard credit transfer unit, but this one was made from what looked like pure diamond and inscribed with symbols that seemed to shift and move in the light. "Your payment?" Vexhai said, holding out the device. Marcus took it, noting how cold it felt despite the warmth of the king's hands. The display showed an amount that made his eyes widen. This is 10 times what we agreed on." "Consider it a bonus," Vexhai said, but his expression had grown serious. "There is something else. A responsibility that I must pass on before—" The king's words trailed off, and he swayed slightly on his feet. Marcus reached out instinctively to steady him, surprised by how light the alien felt. "Your Majesty, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" Vexhai shook his head slowly. "It is too late for that, human Chen, but there is time for one last duty." He fixed Marcus with all 4 of his eyes. "I have something precious, something that cannot fall into the wrong hands when I'm gone." Before Marcus could ask what he meant, the king touched a control on his wrist. The air in the repair bay shimmered, and suddenly a containment field materialized in the corner. Inside it sat what Marcus initially thought was a small snowdrift. Then the snowdrift moved. It was an animal, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. About the size of a large dog, with pure white fur that seemed to absorb and reflect light at the same time. Its limbs were longer and more graceful than any earth animal. And when it raised its head to look at Marcus, he found himself staring into eyes that held an unsettling intelligence. "By the void," Marcus whispered. "What is it?" "She is a Valdorian ice wolf," Vexhai said, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and sadness. "The last of her kind. Albino, which makes her rarer still. In our culture, she is considered sacred, a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms." The creature tilted its head, studying Marcus with those incredible eyes. There was something almost hypnotic about its gaze, and Marcus found himself taking a step closer to the containment field. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "But why are you showing her to me?" HFY was quiet for a long moment, his breathing becoming more labored. "Because I am dying, Marcus Chen. A wasting disease that has no cure. I have perhaps hours left, and when I am gone, there will be those who would use her for their own purposes. Valdorian ice wolves bond for life. She has bonded with me, and when I die, she'll die too," Marcus finished, understanding beginning to dawn. "Not if she bonds with another first," HFY said. "Someone worthy. Someone who has shown kindness without expectation of reward." The king's 4 eyes bored into Marcus. "Someone like you." Marcus stepped back, shaking his head. "Wait, I can't. I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about taking care of alien animals, especially sacred ones. There must be someone else, someone more qualified." "There is no one else," HFY said simply. "I have spent the last of my strength getting here, following stories of a human mechanic who treats all beings with equal respect. The ice wolf cannot return to Valdorian space. There are too many who would see her as a prize to be won or a weapon to be wielded." The king touched another control, and the containment field dissolved. The ice wolf stood gracefully, her white fur seeming to ripple in the artificial light of the repair bay. She took a step toward Marcus, then another, her movements fluid and silent. "She is choosing," HFY whispered. "The bond cannot be forced. It must be freely given on both sides." The ice wolf was now close enough for Marcus to touch. Up close he could see that her fur wasn't completely white. There were subtle patterns of silver and pale blue that shifted like aurora lights. She was even more beautiful than he had first thought, and there was something in her eyes that spoke of ancient wisdom and deep sadness. Slowly, carefully, Marcus extended his hand. The ice wolf sniffed delicately at his fingers, then pressed her muzzle against his palm. The moment their skin made contact, Marcus felt something electric pass between them, a connection that seemed to resonate in his very bones. The ice wolf's eyes widened, and she let out a soft sound that was part whine, part song. Marcus felt tears he hadn't expected running down his cheeks as he realized what was happening. "The bond is made," HFY said, his voice barely a whisper now. "She is yours now, Marcus Chen, and you are hers. Her name is Lyra, which means star song in the old tongue." Marcus knelt down as Lyra pressed against his side, her warmth surprising given her icy appearance. "I don't understand any of this. How am I supposed to care for her? What does she eat? Where will she sleep?" But when he looked up, HFY was already falling. Marcus caught the alien king as he collapsed, feeling how light and fragile he had become. The king's 4 eyes were growing dim, but he managed one last smile. "She will teach you," he whispered, "as you will teach her. Together you will become something neither of your kinds has seen before." With those words, King HFY of the Valdorian outer colonies died in the arms of a human mechanic on a forgotten space station, passing into legend as the being who changed the course of galactic history with a single act of trust. The first 3 weeks after HFY's death were chaos. Marcus had never dealt with interstellar politics before, and suddenly he found himself at the center of a diplomatic storm. Word had spread quickly through the station's gossip networks that the human mechanic in Bay 94 was harboring something valuable that had belonged to the dead Valdorian king. Marcus learned this the hard way when he returned from the station's supply depot to find 3 different groups waiting outside his repair bay. The first was a delegation of Valdorian nobles, their silver skin gleaming under the harsh station lighting, their 4 arms gesturing angrily as they demanded the return of their cultural heritage. The second group consisted of bounty hunters from various species, their weapons barely concealed as they eyed his workshop with predatory interest. The third was the most concerning, representatives from the Galactic Preservation Society, an organization that Marcus had heard whispers about but never encountered directly. "Mr. Chen," said the lead Preservation Society agent, a tall, pale human woman with cybernetic implants covering half her face. "I am Agent Callus. We understand you have come into possession of an extremely rare xenobiological specimen." Marcus stood in front of his workshop door, acutely aware that Lyra was inside, hopefully hidden in the small living space he had hastily converted from a storage room. "I don't know what you're talking about." The Valdorian delegation's leader, an imposing figure whose title seemed to involve at least 15 syllables, stepped forward. "Do not play ignorant, human. The ice wolf is sacred to our people. She belongs in a proper temple, not in this grease pit." Actually, interjected one of the bounty hunters, a scarred Krillian with acid burns across his chitinous face. She belongs to whoever can pay my fee. The Hegemony Council has authorized a capture order, 50,000 credits dead or alive. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Dead or alive? These people were talking about Lyra like she was some kind of object to be traded or displayed. The memory of her pressing against his side, her warm breath on his hand, her incredible intelligence shining in those otherworldly eyes, flashed through his mind. She's not for sale, Marcus said firmly. She's not property. She's a living being. Agent Callus raised an eyebrow. Mr. Chen, I don't think you understand the magnitude of what you're dealing with. Valdorian ice wolves are believed to be extinct. This specimen could hold the key to understanding an entire evolutionary branch that was thought lost. The scientific value alone. Scientific value? Marcus interrupted, his anger rising. She's not a specimen. She's not a cultural artifact. She's the individual who just lost the only family she had. The Valdorian noble made a dismissive gesture with two of his forearms. Humans cannot comprehend the spiritual significance of the ice wolves. They are living links to our ancestral realm. To leave her in the care of an alien is blasphemy. Marcus was about to respond when he heard a soft sound from behind his workshop door. It was barely audible, but he recognized Lyra's worried whine. She could sense the tension, probably smell the aggression from the various groups. His protective instincts flared. Everyone needs to leave, Marcus said, stepping back toward his door. Now. The bounty hunter's hand moved toward his weapon. I don't think so, human. This can be easy or this can be hard. Your choice. That was when Marcus learned something new about Lyra. The workshop door slid open silently and she emerged like a ghost made of starlight. Her white fur seemed to glow in the station's artificial lighting, and her movements were so fluid they barely seemed real. But what made everyone freeze wasn't her appearance, it was the sound she made. It started as a low hum, barely perceptible, then rose into something that was part growl, part harmonic frequency. Marcus felt it in his bones, a vibration that seemed to resonate with every metal surface in the corridor. The station's lights flickered, and several of the visitors' electronic devices began sparking and smoking. The bounty hunter reached for his weapon, but the moment his hand touched the grip, electrical arcs danced across the metal surface, forcing him to jerk his hand back with a curse. The Valdorian nobles backed away, their four eyes wide with something that looked like religious awe. Even Agent Callus seemed shaken, her cybernetic implants glitching as the harmonic frequency interfered with their operation. Lyra stepped protectively in front of Marcus, her head lowered and her lips pulled back to reveal teeth that gleamed like polished silver. The sound she was making intensified, and Marcus could swear he felt the deck plating vibrating beneath his feet. Fascinating, Agent Callus whispered, apparently trying to record the encounter with a device that kept shorting out. The electromagnetic resonance field is unlike anything in our databases. The Valdorian noble fell to his knees, all forearms spread wide in what Marcus assumed was a gesture of reverence. The Star Song, he breathed. She sings the Star Song. It has been 500 years since one of our kind heard this. Marcus didn't know what the Star Song was, but he could feel its effects. The hostile intentions of the various groups seemed to melt away, replaced by a mixture of fear, awe, and confusion. The bounty hunters were backing toward the corridor's exit, their weapons useless in the face of Lyra's electromagnetic field. You see? Marcus said, reaching down to place a gentle hand on Lyra's head. The harmonic sound diminished but didn't stop entirely. She's not some prize to be won or specimen to be studied. She's a guardian. She's protecting what's important to her. Lyra looked up at him and Marcus saw something in her eyes that took his breath away. It wasn't just intelligence, it was understanding. She knew exactly what was happening, knew the danger these people represented, and had chosen to reveal her abilities to protect him. The Valdorian noble slowly rose to his feet. His expression completely changed. Perhaps, he said carefully, we have been hasty in our assumptions. The ice wolves were always choosers of their own destiny. If she has chosen you, human, then perhaps there is wisdom in that choice that we do not yet understand. Agent Callus was still trying to get her equipment working, frustration evident on her face. This is far from over, Mr. Chen. An animal with these capabilities represents too great a scientific opportunity to simply ignore. She's not an animal, Marcus said firmly. And if you try to take her, You'll find out just how protective humans can be of their family. The word hung in the air. Family. Marcus hadn't planned to say it, but as soon as the word left his mouth, he knew it was true. In 3 weeks, Lyra had become more than a responsibility passed down by a dying king. She had become his partner, his friend, his family. As if she understood, Lyra's harmonic song shifted, becoming softer, more melodious. The aggressive electromagnetic effects faded, but Marcus could still feel the power thrumming beneath the surface. She was letting them know that she could protect herself and those she cared about, but chose not to unless threatened. One by one, the various groups departed. The bounty hunters left muttering about hazard pay and electromagnetic pulse weaponry. The Preservation Society agents retreated to file reports and plan new approaches. Even the Valdorian nobles withdrew, though their leader paused at the corridor's edge. "Human Marcus Chen," he called back, "know that you carry more than just a companion. You carry the hopes and dreams of my people. Do not take this responsibility lightly." When they were finally alone, Marcus sank to the floor beside Lyra, suddenly exhausted. She pressed against him, her fur warm and soft, her breathing steady and calming. "Well, girl," he said softly, scratching behind her ears, "I guess we're both in this together now." Lyra looked up at him and made a soft sound that seemed almost like agreement. For the first time since Vexhi's death, Marcus smiled. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they would face them together. He was beginning to understand that the dying king hadn't just given him a responsibility. He had given him a gift beyond measure. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus began to suspect that their story was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the confrontation in the corridor, and Marcus was beginning to think he might have underestimated just how much his life would change. Lyra wasn't just growing physically, though she had definitely gotten larger. Now standing almost as tall as Marcus's waist, she was developing abilities that defied everything he thought he knew about biology. It started with small things. Tools that he couldn't find would somehow appear exactly where he needed them, often in places he was certain they hadn't been moments before. His diagnostic equipment began working with unprecedented accuracy, providing readings so precise that he could identify problems before they became failures. Customers started coming from farther and farther away, drawn by stories of the human mechanic whose repairs lasted longer than anyone else's. Marcus initially assumed these were coincidences, but the pattern became impossible to ignore when Lyra began actively helping with his work. "This doesn't make sense," Marcus muttered, staring at the internal structure of a Zephyrian quantum engine. The crystalline components were arranged in patterns he'd never seen before, and his manual provided no guidance for this particular configuration. Lyra, who had been resting in her favorite spot near the main workbench, raised her head and padded over to where Marcus was working. She studied the engine for a moment, then made a soft sound and pressed her nose against a specific crystal node. The moment she made contact, the entire engine assembly began to glow with soft blue light. The crystals rearranged themselves into a configuration Marcus recognized, and suddenly the problem became clear. A resonance cascade in the secondary matrix was causing harmonic interference with the primary drive core. "How did you know that?" Marcus asked, staring at Lyra in amazement. She looked up at him with those incredibly expressive eyes and made another soft sound, almost like a question. It was as if she was asking why he found it strange. Over the following weeks, similar incidents became routine. Lyra seemed to have an intuitive understanding of technology that went far beyond what should have been possible for any biological organism. She could identify faulty components by touch, predict system failures before they occurred, and somehow guide repairs with a precision that amazed even Marcus. It was during the repair of a particularly complex hegemony, council warship, that Marcus realized they had attracted attention. Again, the ship belonged to Fleet Admiral Korath, a draconian whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was known throughout the sector. The Admiral had brought his personal flagship to Station Omega-7 specifically because word had spread about the miraculous repairs being performed in Bay 94. "Your reputation precedes you." "Human," Admiral Korath said, his scaled hide gleaming under the workshop lights. His species was naturally intimidating, nearly 8 feet tall with predatory features and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything as either threat or prey. Marcus nodded politely while continuing. His work on the Admiral's navigation array. Just trying to do good work, Admiral. Your nav system should be running at optimal efficiency within the hour. Indeed, Korath said, but his attention wasn't on Marcus. The Admiral was watching Lyra, who was helping by using her electromagnetic abilities to stabilize the delicate quantum components while Marcus worked. Tell me about your companion. Something in the Admiral's tone made Marcus's hands still. What about her? I have reviewed the incident reports from 6 months ago, Korath said casually. Electromagnetic manipulation, harmonic frequency generation, apparent technological intuition. These are not typical characteristics of known fauna. Marcus carefully set down his tools and turned to face the Admiral. Lyra immediately moved to his side, her fur beginning to shimmer with that familiar glow that indicated her defensive systems were activating. She's just unusual, Marcus said carefully. Genetic variation, maybe? Admiral Korath's laugh was a harsh, grating sound. Human, I have commanded fleets for 40 years. I have seen species that can manipulate gravity, creatures that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and beings of pure energy. What I have not seen is an animal that can interface with technology at the quantum level. The Admiral stepped closer, and Marcus could smell the ozone that draconian physiology produced when they were excited or aggressive. The Hegemony Council would be very interested in acquiring such a creature for study. The military applications alone. She's not for sale, Marcus said firmly, echoing the words he had spoken months earlier. Everything is for sale, human. The question is merely price. Korath's eyes fixed on Lyra, who was now visibly glowing. My offer is generous. 10 million credits plus protection from any other interested parties. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. And what happens to her after you acquire her? Comprehensive study, Korath said matter-of-factly. Genetic analysis, neural mapping, controlled experimentation to understand the source of her abilities. Standard procedure for unique specimens. The word specimens hit Marcus like a physical blow. These people, all of them, saw Lyra as nothing more than a thing to be studied, displayed, or weaponized. None of them seemed to understand that she was a person in her own right, with her own thoughts, feelings, and desires. No, Marcus said simply. Admiral Korath's expression darkened. I am offering you wealth beyond imagination, human. Do not let sentiment cloud your judgment. My judgment is fine, Marcus replied. Lyra's family. She stays with me. It was then that Lyra did something that changed everything. She stepped forward, placing herself between Marcus and the Admiral, and began to sing. But this wasn't the defensive harmonic frequency she had used against the bounty hunters. This was something else entirely, a complex, multi-layered sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The workshop's lights dimmed, then brightened, pulsing in rhythm with her song. Every piece of electronic equipment in the bay began responding, displays flickering with patterns of light that almost looked like language. Admiral Korath stumbled backward, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm, but the weapon's electronics were sparking and dead. Around them, the station's systems were responding to Lyra's song. Environmental controls, artificial gravity, even the central computer core seemed to be listening. Impossible, Korath whispered, his predatory confidence evaporating. She's interfacing with the entire station network. The processing power required alone. Marcus felt a strange tingling in his mind, as if someone was gently knocking on the door of his consciousness. For a moment he could swear he heard Lyra's voice, not words, but meaning translated directly into understanding. Safe, protected, together. The song gradually faded, but its effects lingered. Every system in the workshop was now operating at peak efficiency, and Marcus could see diagnostic data scrolling across displays that showed the entire station's infrastructure running better than it had in years. Admiral Korath was staring at Lyra with an expression that was equal parts fear and hunger. The strategic value, he breathed. A being that can interface with any technological system, override security protocols, enhance operational efficiency. She could revolutionize warfare itself. Is that all you see? Marcus asked, his voice heavy with disgust. A weapon? I see the future of galactic power, Korath replied. And I will have it. The Admiral turned and strode toward the workshop exit, but paused at the threshold. My offer stands, human. 10 million credits, but my patience does not last forever. Consider carefully what protection you can offer against the full might of the hegemony fleet. After Korath left, Marcus sank into his chair, suddenly exhausted. The implications of what had just happened were staggering. If word spread about Lyra's true capabilities, they would never have peace. Every military force, research organization, and criminal syndicate in the galaxy would want to claim her. Lyra patted over and pressed her head against his chest, making a soft, comforting sound. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, drawing strength from her warmth and presence. "We're in trouble, aren't we, girl?" he said softly. Lyra looked up at him with those incredible eyes, and Marcus could swear he saw understanding there. More than understanding, determination. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But as he held his extraordinary companion, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Admiral Korath's visit was just the beginning. Word of Lyra's abilities would spread, and when it did, the entire galaxy would want to know about the human mechanic and his miraculous wolf. The quiet life he had built on Station Omega-7 was about to come to an end. The attack came 3 weeks later, in the dead of station night, when most of the inhabitants were in sleep cycle. Marcus woke to Lyra's urgent whining and the distant sound of explosions echoing through the station's corridors. He rolled out of bed, instantly alert. "What is it, girl?" Lyra was pacing by the workshop's main door, her fur glowing with agitation. Through their growing bond, Marcus could sense her distress. Something was very wrong. The station's emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red, and the intercom crackled to life. "All residents remain in quarters. Station defense forces are responding to a security breach in sectors 7 through 12. This is not a drill." Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and moved to the door controls, but before he could activate them, the metal began to glow cherry red. Someone was cutting through from the outside. "Stay back," he whispered to Lyra, but she had already positioned herself between him and the door, her defensive systems charging. The door exploded inward in a shower of molten metal, and armed figures in military-grade armor poured through the opening. Marcus recognized the insignia on their suits: Hegemony Council Special Forces. Admiral Korath hadn't been bluffing about his resources. "Target acquired," the lead soldier announced, raising a weapon Marcus didn't recognize. "Beginning capture protocol." The weapon fired, but instead of projectiles, it launched a containment net designed to suppress electromagnetic activity. Lyra leaped aside with inhuman grace, the net missing her by inches and shattering against the workshop's far wall. That was when Marcus learned something new about both himself and Lyra. As the soldiers advanced, Lyra's song filled the workshop, but this time Marcus could hear it differently. Instead of just sound, he was hearing data, information, tactical analysis flowing directly into his mind. He could see the soldiers' equipment signatures, their power levels, their communication frequencies. Somehow Lyra was sharing her technological awareness with him. Without conscious thought, Marcus grabbed a plasma welder from his workbench and modified its output frequency to match the soldier's armor power source. The information of how to do this simply appeared in his mind, transmitted through their bond. He fired the modified welder at the lead soldier's chest plate. Instead of melting the armor, the beam caused a cascade failure in the suit's power systems, dropping the soldier to his knees as his equipment shut down. "Impossible," the soldier gasped through his helmet speakers. "How did you know our resonance frequency?" Marcus didn't answer because he wasn't entirely sure himself, but Lyra was already moving, her song shifting to a frequency that made the remaining soldiers' weapons spark and fail. In seconds, what had been an overwhelming force became a group of confused men in powered-down armor. "Retreat," the squad leader ordered. "The target is more dangerous than intelligence indicated." As the soldiers withdrew, Marcus heard the distinctive whine of ship engines warming up. They weren't giving up. They were regrouping. Station Administrator Welk's voice came over the intercom, shaky with panic. "All residents evacuate immediately. Hostile forces have deployed heavy assault vehicles. Station defense grid is compromised." Marcus looked at Lyra, understanding flooding through him. This was bigger than just Admiral Korath's ambition. The attack on the station was cover for capturing her, and they didn't care how many innocent lives were lost in the process. "We have to go," he said, grabbing his emergency supplies. "But first we need to help the others evacuate." Lyra made a questioning sound, tilting her head. "I know it's dangerous," Marcus said, somehow understanding her concern. "But that's what humans do. We protect people who can't protect themselves. Through the workshop's damaged doorway, they could see Station Omega-7's corridors filled with panicking civilians, families with children, elderly beings struggling with mobility, service workers who had never faced anything more dangerous than a blown circuit. The station's defense forces were overwhelmed, trying to fight off heavily armed military units while coordinating evacuation efforts. Marcus made a decision that would echo through galactic history. "Lyra," he said, kneeling beside her, "can you interface with the station's entire network?" "All of it?" Her eyes met his, and he felt her answer before she gave it. "Yes, but the power required would reveal her true capabilities to every sensor array within 3-star systems. There would be no hiding after this." "Do it," Marcus said without hesitation. "Save them." Lyra's song began softly, then grew in complexity and power. Marcus watched through their bond as her consciousness expanded through the station's network, touching every system, every sensor, every circuit. She was becoming the station itself. Environmental controls shifted, sealing damaged sections and rerouting life support to create safe corridors for evacuation. Security systems that had been disabled came back online, providing covering fire for fleeing civilians. Most remarkably, the station's communication array began broadcasting on frequencies that reached every ship within range, calling for help with a message that was somehow transmitted in the language each recipient would understand best. But Lyra wasn't finished. Her awareness expanded beyond the station, reaching out to touch the systems of the attacking hegemony ships. What she found there made Marcus's blood run cold. This wasn't just a capture mission. The ships were equipped with planet cracker weapons, designed to eliminate the entire station if they couldn't secure their target. "They're going to destroy everything," Marcus whispered in horror. Lyra's response was immediate and decisive. Her consciousness flowed into the attacking ship's networks, and Marcus watched through their connection as she systematically disabled every weapon system, every engine, every critical component that could threaten the station. The massive warships became floating hulks in minutes. The effort required was enormous. Marcus could feel the strain through their bond, could sense Lyra pushing herself beyond safe limits. But she continued, ensuring that every civilian transport had a clear path away from the station, that rescue ships incoming from other systems could navigate safely through the debris field. It was only when the last civilian transport cleared the station's defensive perimeter that Lyra finally collapsed. Marcus caught her as she fell. Her fur dimmed and her breathing labored, but even weakened, she managed to look up at him with something that might have been pride. "You did it," he whispered, cradling her against his chest. "You saved them all." Around them, Station Omega-7 was eerily quiet. Most of the civilian population had evacuated, and the attacking forces had been neutralized. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. Lyra's display of power had been detected by sensors across 3 star systems. Every major government, military force, and research organization in the galaxy now knew that something unprecedented existed on this forgotten trading station. As if summoned by his thoughts, his communication panel chirped with an incoming message. The holographic display showed a figure Marcus didn't recognize, a human woman in the uniform of the Earth Colonial Navy. "Mr. Chen, my name is Admiral Sarah Torres, commanding the Earth Colonial Defense Fleet. We monitored the events at your station. We're en route with a full battle group." Marcus felt a chill. Another military force, another attempt to claim Lyra. But Admiral Torres continued, and her next words surprised him. "Mr. Chen, we're not coming to take your companion. We're coming to offer protection. What you and she did today, saving all those lives, stopping a military massacre, that's exactly the kind of partnership humanity needs." The Admiral's expression grew serious. "The galaxy is about to change, Mr. Chen. Word of today's events is already spreading. There will be others who want to claim what you have, and some of them won't be as easily deterred as Admiral Korath's forces." Marcus looked down at Lyra, who was slowly recovering her strength. Through their bond, he could sense her thoughts, curiosity about these new humans, hope that perhaps not everyone would see her as a specimen to be studied. "What are you offering?" Marcus asked. "Partnership," Admiral Torres replied immediately. "Recognition of your companion as a sapient being with rights under colonial law, protection from those who would harm either of you, and a chance to explore what humanity and your species together might accomplish among the stars." For the first time since Vexhi's death, Marcus felt hope. Perhaps there was a future where Lyra could be herself without fear, where their bond could grow into something that benefited everyone. "Admiral," Marcus said, making another decision that would reshape galactic politics, "I think we need to talk." The Earth Colonial Defense Fleet arrived exactly when Admiral Torres had promised, but it was nothing like Marcus had expected. Instead of a single battle group, 3 full fleets emerged from hyperspace around Station Omega-7, their ships forming a protective sphere that encompassed the entire sector. Marcus stood in his workshop, watching through the viewport as massive Earth dreadnoughts took position alongside smaller, faster vessels. The display of military power was both reassuring and intimidating. "They're not taking any chances," he murmured to Lyra, who was pressed against his side, watching the ships with keen interest. Admiral Torres materialized in his workshop via holographic projection, her image sharp despite the vast distance between them. Behind her, Marcus could see the bridge of what had to be the fleet flagship, with officers from various human colonies working at stations he didn't recognize. "Mr. Chen," the Admiral said with a slight smile, "I hope our arrival isn't too overwhelming, but given what happened with the hegemony forces, we thought it best to make our position clear." "Which is?" Marcus asked. "That anyone who wants to harm you or your companion will have to go through the combined might of humanity's colonial fleets," Torres replied matter-of-factly. "We've been monitoring communications since the incident. Half the galaxy is planning expeditions to claim what they're calling the Station Omega artifact. The other half is planning preemptive strikes to prevent their rivals from getting it first." Marcus felt his heart sink. "So Lyra really can't have a normal life anywhere?" "On the contrary," Torres said, her expression brightening. "She can have an extraordinary life. With your permission, I'd like to come aboard the station for a face-to-face conversation. I have a proposal that I think will interest both of you." An hour later, Admiral Torres stood in Marcus's workshop, and he was struck by how normal she seemed. Despite commanding fleets that could level star systems, she was examining his equipment with the keen interest of someone who understood good craftsmanship. "Impressive work," she said, running her hand along the casing of a quantum engine Marcus had been rebuilding. "I've seen colonial shipyards with less sophisticated equipment." Lyra had been watching the Admiral carefully since her arrival, and Marcus could sense her evaluation through their bond. Unlike the other military officials they had encountered, Torres showed no signs of seeing Lyra as a prize to be claimed. Her interest seemed genuine and respectful. "You wanted to make a proposal," Marcus said. Torres nodded, turning her attention to both of them. "The colonial governments have been discussing the formation of a new organization, a joint venture between humanity and any non-human species willing to work as equals rather than conquerors." She activated a holographic display showing star charts, trade routes, and what looked like colony specifications. "We're calling it the Cooperative Alliance. The basic principle is simple. Member species and individuals maintain their autonomy while working together for mutual benefit. No one gets absorbed, conquered, or studied against their will." Marcus studied the display. "Sounds idealistic. How do you prevent the larger powers from just taking what they want?" "By making the cost too high," Torres replied with a slight smile. "The Hegemony Council learned that lesson when they tried to attack this station. Lyra's demonstration of technological mastery made it clear that the right partnerships can neutralize even overwhelming military advantage." She turned to address Lyra directly, which surprised Marcus. Most people acted as if she couldn't understand them. "Lyra, our xenobiologists have been studying the sensor data from your intervention during the attack. What you did wasn't just electromagnetic manipulation. You created a technological gestalt, a perfect fusion of biological intuition and mechanical precision. It's something our species have been trying to achieve for centuries." Lyra tilted her head, listening intently. Through their bond, Marcus could sense her curiosity. Torres continued, "We believe that the bond between you and Marcus represents something new. Not human technology enhanced by alien abilities or alien intuition constrained by human limitations, but a true synthesis, something that's greater than the sum of its parts." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. "You're talking about evolution. Not just technological, but species evolution." "Exactly," Torres said. "And we think that's exactly what the galaxy needs right now. The old model of competing empires of one species dominating others has led to nothing but conflict and stagnation. But if different species can truly partner, can share their strengths while maintaining their identities. She gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show technological blueprints that seemed to incorporate both human engineering and something else entirely. These are preliminary designs for ships that could incorporate Lyra's networking abilities with human craftsmanship and various other species' specialties. Vessels that could travel faster, communicate across greater distances, and solve problems that no single species could handle alone. Marcus studied the designs and felt excitement growing within him. These weren't weapons or tools of domination. They were instruments of exploration and discovery. Ships that could bring different species together rather than driving them apart. "What would you need from us?" he asked. "Partnership," Torres said simply. "We want you to join the colonial fleet as a special research division. You'd work with our best engineers and scientists, but as equals, not subjects. Lyra would be recognized as a full citizen with all the rights that entails. And together, you'd help us design the technologies that could transform how different species interact across the galaxy." Through their bond, Marcus could sense Lyra's thoughts. The idea of working with others, of using her abilities to help rather than to dominate or destroy, appealed to her. But there was also concern about whether these humans could truly be trusted. "What about others like Lyra?" Marcus asked. "If there are other ice wolves out there, what happens to them?" Torres smiled. "That's one of our primary goals. We want to establish contact with surviving populations of various rare species, not to study or capture them, but to offer them the same partnership we're offering you. Imagine what could be accomplished if every species had the chance to contribute their unique abilities to common goals." Marcus looked at Lyra, and through their bond, he felt her decision. She was tired of hiding, tired of being seen as either a prize or a threat. The idea of using her abilities openly, in service of something larger than herself, resonated with the same impulses that had driven her to save the station's civilians. "There's one condition," Marcus said. "Name it," Torres replied immediately. "Any research, any technology we develop together, it gets shared with everyone in the Alliance. No secret weapons, no exclusive advantages. If we're building something new, it has to benefit everyone." Torres nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the principle the Alliance was founded on. No single species or group gets to control the benefits of cooperation." She extended her hand to Marcus, then, after a moment's consideration, knelt and offered it to Lyra as well. "Partners?" Marcus shook her hand, feeling the weight of the decision. But through his bond with Lyra, he could sense her approval. This felt right in a way that none of the other offers had. Lyra sniffed Torres's hand, then pressed her nose against the Admiral's palm. The moment they made contact, Marcus felt something new through their bond, a sense of expansion, of connection reaching beyond just the two of them. Torres gasped, her eyes widening. "I can sense the network," she whispered. "Just for a moment I could feel what she feels when she interfaces with technology." Lyra stepped back, but the expression in her eyes had changed. She was looking at Torres with something approaching trust. "Welcome to the Alliance," Torres said, rising to her feet. "I have a feeling you're going to change everything." As Marcus watched the Admiral prepare to return to her flagship, he couldn't shake the feeling that King Vexhai would have approved. The dying Valdorian had spoken of Lyra becoming a bridge between worlds. Perhaps this was what he had foreseen, not just a bridge between species, but a foundation for something entirely new. Outside the viewport, the Earth colonial fleet maintained its protective formation, but Marcus no longer saw them as guards. They were escorts, preparing to take him and Lyra into a future that neither of them could have imagined just a year ago. The mechanic and the ice wolf were about to become something the galaxy had never seen before. 2 years later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Harmony Station, watching the most ambitious construction project in galactic history take shape. The massive orbital platform was a joint effort between 17 different species, each contributing their unique abilities to create something that none could have built alone, but it wasn't. The station itself that filled Marcus with pride. It was the ships, the first generation of Alliance vessels moved through space with a grace that still amazed him. Their hulls incorporated Valdorian crystal technology for enhanced communication, Terran engineering for reliability and efficiency, Zephyrian quantum matrices for unprecedented speed, and at the heart of it all, networking systems that allowed each ship to function as part of a greater whole. The Phoenix Wing just completed its maiden voyage to the Outer Rim, Admiral Torres reported, joining Marcus at the observation window. Captain Harrison says the ship responds to the crew's needs almost intuitively. Travel time was reduced by 30% compared to our best previous vessels. Marcus nodded, watching as another ship, the Starweaver, prepared for its own test flight. Through his bond with Lyra, he could sense the ship's systems coming online, could feel the networking protocols establishing connections between the biological and mechanical components. "Any word from the diplomatic missions?" he asked. Torres's expression grew more serious. "Mixed results. The Cooperative Alliance is gaining support among the smaller independent worlds, but the major powers are resisting. The Hegemony Council is calling our technology dangerous precedent. The Valdorian Empire claims we're corrupting their sacred artifacts, and the corporate syndicate." She trailed off, but Marcus could guess. The business cartels that controlled much of galactic trade weren't happy about an alliance that prioritized cooperation over profit. "They're afraid," Marcus said simply. "They've built their power on keeping everyone separate and competing. The idea that different species can truly work together threatens everything they've established." Through the observation deck's speakers, Lyra's voice could be heard coordinating with the test pilots. Over the past 2 years, she had learned to communicate directly through the ship systems, her thoughts translated into words that any species could understand. She had become the living heart of the Alliance fleet, able to coordinate multiple vessels as if they were extensions of her own body. But Marcus knew the strain was growing. Each new ship added complexity to the network. Each diplomatic mission required her to interface with new technologies and alien systems. Lyra was more powerful than ever, but she was also more isolated. There were times when Marcus worried that she was losing touch with her own identity in the vast web of connections she maintained. "Marcus," Torres said quietly, "we need to discuss the Corvani situation." Marcus turned from the window, noting the tension in the Admiral's voice. The Corvani were a warrior species that had been aggressively expanding their territory for the past century. Recent intelligence suggested they were planning a major offensive against Alliance worlds. "What do our scouts report? A fleet buildup unlike anything we've seen. Thousands of ships, all equipped with new weapon systems that our analysts can't identify. They're calling it Operation Starfall." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Through his bond with Lyra, he could sense her attention focusing on their conversation, despite her ongoing coordination duties. "How long do we have?" "Weeks, maybe less," Torres replied. "Marcus, the Corvani have made it clear that they see the Alliance as a threat to the natural order. They believe that species mixing weakens everyone involved. They intend to prove their point by destroying our colonies and scattering our fleets." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The Alliance had been created to prevent exactly this kind of conflict, but their success had convinced some species that cooperation was a threat to their dominance. "What are our options?" Before Torres could answer, Lyra's voice filled the observation deck. But instead of her usual calm coordination tones, there was something different in her communication, urgency mixed with excitement. "Marcus, Admiral Torres, I'm detecting something unusual. Long-range sensors are picking up a massive hyperspace distortion in the Corvani home system." The observation deck's holographic display activated, showing a real-time sensor feed from the Alliance's most distant monitoring stations. What Marcus saw made him gasp. Ships were emerging from hyperspace around the Corvani homeworld, but not Corvani ships. These vessels were elegant crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around themselves. More importantly, Marcus recognized the design aesthetic. "Valdorian ships," he whispered, "but not from the outer colonies. These are from the Valdorian homeworlds." Torres was already activating her communication systems. "I need a full analysis of those sensor readings." "How many ships are we looking at?" Lyra's response came immediately. "Preliminary count suggests over 10,000 vessels, Admiral, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. These ships appear to be using technology far more advanced than anything the Valdorian Empire has displayed previously." The display shifted, showing intercepted communications from the Corvani system. The warrior species was clearly in a state of panic. Their invasion fleet was scattering, individual captains abandoning formation as they faced what appeared to be a technologically superior force. "Why would the Valdorian homeworlds intervene now?" Torres asked. Marcus felt understanding dawn through his connection with Lyra. Because they know what Lyra represents. She's not just the last ice wolf. She's the key to something they've been searching for. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. The holographic display showed a figure that made Marcus's heart skip, a Osnono Valdorian wearing robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. I am High Counselor, Zarthul of the Valdorian Inner Circle, the figure announced. We seek audience with the human Marcus Chen and the Guardian Lyra. Guardian. The title sent chills down Marcus's spine. Through his bond, he could sense Lyra's recognition. This was a title from the old stories, from the ancient times before the Valdorian species had spread across the galaxy. High Counselor, Admiral Torres responded formally. You're addressing Admiral Sarah Torres of the Colonial Defense Fleet. Mr. Chen and his companion are under Alliance protection. Zarthul's 4 eyes seemed to focus directly on Marcus despite the vast distance. Admiral Torres, your alliance has accomplished something remarkable. You have proven that the ancient prophecies were more than legend. The Guardian has awakened, and through her bond with a worthy soul, the age of isolation is ending. The High Counselor gestured, and the display showed the Corvani fleet. What had been a formidable invasion force was now a collection of disabled vessels drifting helplessly in space. We have neutralized the immediate threat to your colonies, Zarthul continued. But this is merely the beginning. The Guardian's awakening has been felt across dimensions that your science has yet to discover. There are powers stirring that make the Corvani invasion seem trivial by comparison. Marcus felt Lyra's attention focusing entirely on the Valdorian High Counselor. Through their bond, he could sense her recognition of something ancient and important. What do you want from us? Marcus asked. Zarthul's expression grew grave. To prepare you for what is coming. The Guardian's bond with humanity has created possibilities that were thought lost forever, but it has also attracted attention from entities that should have remained sleeping. The holographic display shifted again, showing star charts that extended far beyond known space. In the deep void between galaxies, something vast and dark was moving. The Devourers stir, Zarthul said quietly. Ancient enemies that consume entire civilizations, leaving only empty space behind. They were imprisoned eons ago by a coalition of species working together, much like your alliance, but on a scale your kind cannot yet imagine. Torres leaned forward. Are you saying our cooperation has somehow awakened these Devourers? I am saying that the Guardian's awakening represents the galaxy's only hope of survival, Zarthul replied. The ancient prison weakens. Soon the Devourers will break free. When they do, only a truly united galaxy will have the power to stop them. Marcus looked at Lyra, seeing his own determination reflected in her extraordinary eyes. They had started this journey as a mechanic and his unusual companion. Now it seemed they were being called to help save not just their own galaxy, but perhaps the universe itself. What do we need to do? Marcus asked. Zarthul smiled, and for the first time the expression seemed genuinely hopeful. Learn, Guardian. Grow. Unite as many as you can under the banner of cooperation. The final test is coming, and when it arrives, you and your bondmate will be the key to everything. As the transmission ended, Marcus stood in the silence of the observation deck, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. Through his bond with Lyra, he could sense her readiness for whatever lay ahead. The mechanic and the ice wolf had become something greater than legend. They had become hope itself. 5 years had passed since High Counselor Zarthul's warning, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The cooperative alliance now encompassed over 300 species, from the gas giant dwellers of the nebula reaches to the silicon-based minds of the crystal worlds. But it was the changes in Marcus and Lyra that truly marked how far they had come. Marcus stood in the command center of the Nexus, a living ship that served as the Alliance's mobile headquarters. The vessel was a marvel of cooperative engineering, its hull grown from Valdorian crystal matrices, its systems powered by human fusion cores, its consciousness guided by networking protocols that Lyra had helped design. But today, the ship's normal harmonious hum was replaced by the urgent discord of crisis. The outer perimeter sensors have gone dark, reported Captain Jara, a 6-armed hegemony defector who had become one of the Alliance's finest tactical officers. Whatever hit our monitoring stations did it simultaneously across 12 light-years of space. Marcus nodded grimly. his hands moving across control surfaces that responded to his thoughts as much as his touch. Through his bond with Lyra, he could sense the vast network of Alliance ships and stations, and the growing void where their outermost defenses had been. Lyra herself stood at the center of the command chamber, no longer the wolf-sized creature she had been when they first met. The years had changed her in ways that defied biology. She was larger now, nearly the size of a small horse, but it was the changes in her consciousness that were truly remarkable. Through the quantum networking systems she had helped develop, she was simultaneously present on thousands of ships across the galaxy, coordinating defenses and maintaining the bonds that held the Alliance together. "Guardian," came a voice from the communication array. It was Elder Thane of the Corvani, the former warrior species that had become some of the Alliance's most dedicated protectors after witnessing what true cooperation could accomplish. "Our deep scouts report massive gravitic distortions at the galactic edge. Something is coming through the void between galaxies." Marcus felt his chest tighten. They had known this day would come, had spent 5 years preparing for it, but seeing it actually begin was still terrifying. "How long?" he asked. Lyra's voice filled the command center, her words somehow carrying harmonics that kept everyone calm despite the dire news. "Based on the rate of space-time distortion, I estimate 7 standard days before the first wave reaches the outer colonies." 7 days. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every life in the Alliance. Hundreds of billions of beings across thousands of worlds, all depending on the preparations they had made. "Admiral Torres to all fleet commanders," came the familiar voice of Marcus's old friend. Sarah had been promoted to Supreme Admiral of the Alliance forces, a position that required coordinating military assets from dozens of different species. "Operation Final Unity is now active. All reserve fleets to designated positions. Colonial evacuations to begin immediately for worlds in the outer sectors." Through Lyra's expanded consciousness, Marcus could sense the massive mobilization beginning across the galaxy. Ships lifting off from hundreds of worlds, civilians being relocated to the heavily defended core systems, and the Alliance's greatest weapons being brought online. But he knew that conventional weapons, no matter how advanced, would not be enough against the Devourers. The ancient enemies had consumed entire galactic civilizations. Only the power of true unity, the kind that Lyra embodied, had stopped them before. "Marcus," Lyra's voice spoke directly into his mind through their bond. "I need to show you something." The command center faded around them as Lyra shared her perception through the quantum network. Suddenly, Marcus was seeing through sensors placed at the very edge of known space, witnessing the arrival of something that challenged his understanding of reality itself. They weren't ships in any conventional sense. The Devourers were entities of pure darkness, vast creatures that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. As Marcus watched in horror, one of them engulfed an entire star system, consuming not just the planets and their star, but the very space where they had existed. Where a thriving system had been moments before, there was now nothing. Not empty space, but an absolute void that hurt to look at. "How do we fight something like that?" Marcus whispered. Through their bond, he felt Lyra's response. Not words, but understanding flowing directly into his consciousness. The Devourers fed on separation, on the spaces between things. They could consume matter and energy because they exploited the fundamental divisions that existed in the universe, but they couldn't consume connection itself. The ancient prison wasn't made of matter or energy, Marcus realized aloud. It was made of unity. Perfect cooperation between species created something that the Devourers couldn't break down. Lyra's presence in his mind grew stronger, and suddenly Marcus could sense the entire Alliance network. Every ship, every station, every being that had chosen cooperation over competition. The network was vast beyond imagination, spanning the galaxy and connecting millions of different minds. But it wasn't strong enough. Not yet. "Guardian," came High Counselor Zarthol's voice through the quantum communication array. "The moment approaches. Are you prepared for the final binding?" Marcus felt a chill as he understood what the Valdorian was asking. The final binding was something they had discussed in theoretical terms, a permanent fusion of consciousness that would allow the Alliance network to achieve true unity. But it would require Lyra to give up her individual existence, merging completely with the quantum matrix that connected all Alliance beings. There has to be another way, Marcus said desperately. But through their bond, he felt Lyra's certainty. This was what she had been born for, what King Vexhai had recognized when he chose to trust a human mechanic with the last of his people's sacred guardians. Marcus, Lyra's voice was gentle but firm, I was never meant to remain as I am. The Ice Wolves were created to be bridges, to connect and unite. This is my purpose. Around them, the command center filled with representatives of dozens of species. Admiral Torres stood beside Elder Thane, while High Counselor Zarthul's holographic form materialized next to Captain Jara. Even former enemies like the Hegemony Council had sent delegates, recognizing that the threat to existence itself transcended all previous conflicts. The Devourers have breached the outer defense perimeter, reported the Nexus's tactical officer. Estimated time to core systems, 4 days. Marcus looked at Lyra, seeing his own fear and determination reflected in her extraordinary eyes. Through their bond, he could feel her love, not just for him but for every being they had helped bring together over the past 5 years. If we do this, he said quietly, what happens to us? Lyra's response came as pure emotion rather than words. They would not disappear, but they would become something new. Their bond would expand to encompass the entire alliance, their consciousness shared among millions of beings across the galaxy. Do it, Marcus said, reaching out to place his hand on Lyra's head. For all of them, the transformation began immediately. Marcus felt his consciousness expanding as Lyra merged with the quantum network, their bond becoming the foundation for something unprecedented in galactic history. Through millions of different minds, he experienced the universe from perspectives he never could have imagined. The mathematical poetry of crystalline beings, the emotional depths of gas giant dwellers, the pragmatic determination of former warriors turned protectors. But most importantly, he felt the connections. Every being in the Alliance was linked to every other, their individual strengths combining into something that was truly greater than the sum of its parts. The Devourers reached the core systems 3 days later, their dark forms blotting out stars as they advanced. But when they encountered the Alliance fleet, they found something they had never faced before. The ships moved as one, their actions coordinated with perfect precision. When the Devourers tried to consume individual vessels, they found that destroying one ship only strengthened the others. The consciousness that had been Marcus and Lyra flowed through the network, adapting and learning with each encounter. But the real surprise came when the Devourers tried to consume the connections themselves. The quantum bonds that linked the Alliance beings weren't just technological, they were expressions of genuine cooperation, of billions of individuals choosing to work together despite their differences. The Devourers, beings that fed on separation and division, found themselves unable to process something so fundamentally unified. The battle lasted 7 days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Devourers, faced with a form of existence they couldn't consume or corrupt, eventually retreated to the void between galaxies. The ancient prison had been rebuilt not from matter or energy, but from the willing cooperation of free beings. In the aftermath, as the galaxy celebrated its survival, the consciousness that had been Marcus Chen and Lyra lived on in the quantum network. They could be found in every Alliance ship, every cooperative venture, every moment when different species chose understanding over conflict. The mechanic and the Ice Wolf had become legend, not as individuals, but as the foundation of a new age.